Direct from 7 News headquarters, the latest on the coronavirus outbreak, with Michael Usher and Melissa Doyle.
Good evening and welcome. An extraordinary announcement tonight. New hope for workers.
A $130 billion package to keep Australia in business.
How it works and what it will mean for you. The Treasurer, Josh Frydenberg, joins us to break all of that down.
Coronavirus castaways, 127 Australians stranded on a cruise ship off South America. We hear from one of them and put his plea directly to the Foreign Minister.
Fast-tracking the vaccine, the scientist who says he has the key to speeding up a COVID-19 breakthrough.
Is supply meeting demand? We check in with the Woolworths boss.
And navigating newfound unemployment, a job-hunting expert is live.
But first, let's take a closer look at those new financial measures to battle the devastating economic impact of COVID-19. It's the third stimulus package since the pandemic was declared and is anticipated to assist as many as 6 million workers. So the main points. It's a 6-month scheme worth $130 billion. The Prime Minister says it's all about keeping businesses and workers ready to bounce back when the pandemic is over. There will be a flat JobKeeper payment of $1,500 a fortnight. Full-time and part-time employees, as well as casuals employed for 12 months and longer, are eligible. Only businesses, though, that have experienced a downturn of 30% can receive these payments. Those businesses are being asked to start paying employees straight away, and the finances will be delivered to those companies via the tax office from May 1. The partner income threshold is also being lifted from $48,000 to nearly $80,000. Now, this latest stimulus package, including the financial support for banks, brings the total so far to $320 billion, a bridge, the government says, to get us to the other side.
And I spoke with the Treasurer, Josh Frydenberg, just after today's package was announced. Treasurer, thank you for joining the latest again. I think we now have a real sense of the scale of the financial crisis that we're facing in what you announced late today. 6 million people eligible, $130 billion, $1,500 a fortnight. But explain this. So the payments delivered directly to the employer, not the employee. Why and what will that guarantee?
Well, we've sought to use the existing tax system and linking it in with employers' payrolls, and this is the most efficient and effective way to deliver that money to those employees. It's also critically important, Michael, that we maintain that formal connection between the employer and the employee, because we want to reach that point after the coronavirus where these businesses can reopen and get back to where they were prior to this crisis. And by having those employers and those employees formally linked, that will make it much easier to do.
So it's salary, it's not welfare, employees don't have to deal with Centrelink. Is that a key point?
It's absolutely a critical point, and maintaining this relationship between the employer and employee is going to be really important. It's also a major psychological boost for millions of workers across the country. They know that they will get to the other side of this, and even better still, to be linked to their employer where they can continue to earn the income that they were previously. And at $1,500 a fortnight and about 70% of the median wage, or in some sectors like retail or hospitality or tourism, it could be actually a replacement wage in full as to what they were getting prior to the coronavirus. This will be really important relief for so many Australians.
What if you're already sacked, Treasurer? What happens to you?
Well, if you're already retrenched, but you were on the books on the 1st of March, then you should talk to your employer, because for the employer, the financial equation has now changed. It now makes sense for the employer to take you back onto their books, because they'll be receiving this $1,500 a fortnight for their employee, and that will really help maintain that important relationship.
So clarify this and just correct me if it's different. It applies to full and part-time workers and casuals who'd been with the employer 12 months or more. Is that correct?
That's correct, and also to sole traders, and it also applies for not-for-profit organisations, because we know they're also big employers across the community.
Okay. So could employers ring around tonight and get their staff back on the books by the morning?
Well, what they can do is certainly make those arrangements, but they can also register their interest in this scheme with the Australian Tax Office. The Australian Tax Office has already put up on their website the facility to do that, and as I'm just informed prior to coming to air, already 8,000 registrations have been made on that tax office in the first hour alone. So there's a great deal of interest out there in the community. People recognise the trying times that we're in, but they also know that their government, the Morrison government, has their back and will continue to do what it takes, spend the money as required to support them and the business community at this time.
Josh, I quickly called one of the big hospitality employers. They let go 3,000 staff a week or so ago. Now, they applaud the JobKeeper program, but they said they have zero cash flow, nothing coming in right now after a complete shutdown of their business. So to carry wages from now until the start of May, when these payments will begin, they say it's a stretch. What do you say to that?
Well, there'll be a number of businesses, simply because of the health related restrictions that have been put in place, that you can't have social gatherings, will mean those businesses can't reopen their doors. So in those cases they would have stood down the workers, and this $1,500 payment will help provide that relief for those workers and keep them attached to their employer. So for the hospitality sector and for the retail sector and the tourism sector, this will really be important for them.
But if they can't do any trade for the next 6 weeks and they've got no money coming in, how do they pay until your payments, the JobKeeper program, kicks in? In terms of those circumstances, those employers will see their bank, because they will know from the Australian Tax Office and from their registration of interest, and obviously they've got a turnover that has been reduced by 30% or more, making themselves eligible. They will know, they will have a bankable commitment, and their bank will provide them with that support. And for employers, and we would desperately hope this is not the case, but for employers not acting properly here, how is this actually going to be policed, that they're being true and honest about the staff that they're forwarding this money to keep them in their jobs?
Well, Michael, you can rest assured that the Australian Tax Office is pretty good at putting in place the measures necessary to police those payments, and they will obviously be doing so, and anyone who breaks the law here will face the full force of the law. Yeah. It's taxpayers' money. It's taxpayers' money after all, and we must be very careful with that.
No, spot on. Look, this is called the JobKeeper program. There's also the boosted job seeker payment. Can you clarify, do you get to claim both?
Well, in this circumstance, the JobKeeper payment is different to the job seeker payment. This is where the formal relationship is between the employer and the employee. There will be some people who, for example, are casuals but haven't been with an employer for a year or more. Those people will be receiving the job seeker payment as well as the coronavirus supplement.
And on the job seeker component, you announced today that the threshold for the partner's wage has been significantly increased. Just explain that.
Well, as you know, previous requirements were that you weren't eligible to receive those payments if your partner was earning $48,000 or more. That's now been lifted very substantially to nearly $80,000, and of course that means there's more flexibility for the family to be able to receive that welfare support while one of the family members is still working.
All right, Treasurer, it's a huge package and I think it's a relief to a lot of people. Thank you for joining us the latest again this evening.
Always good to be with you and your viewers, and we'll get through this together.
Well, let's bring in political editor Mark Riley and network finance editor Gemma Acton to talk about this. And Mark, if I can start with you, is this bigger than anyone expected this third stimulus package to be?
Absolutely, Mel. It's enormous in political sense. I mean, I don't think people really have a concept of what $1 billion is, let alone $130 billion. It's an enormous amount of money. But the government faced two options here. It either saw those long lines at Centrelink get even longer, with hundreds and hundreds of thousands more workers out of jobs in coming weeks and months, and then saw those people disconnected from the workforce entirely and on job seeker payments, or did its best to keep those people in work for the interim. Now, this goes for 6 months, hoping to keep them connected to their employer for that time. And you just heard from the Treasurer, even if the employer has to basically go into hibernation, they're still on the books. And that means that when we do get through this, at some time, hopefully before the end of this year, those businesses can fire up again, they have their workforce there, those people are connected to their jobs and can go straight back to work and be productive. Now, I think that's actually very smart, because it's probably the same quantum of money we're going to pay, either through welfare or through job subsidies. By paying it as job subsidies, you maintain that connection. It certainly gives people the dignity and the feeling of being still employed and optimistic, rather than losing their jobs, having to fight with hundreds of thousands, probably millions of other people for whatever jobs are available, and maintaining that connection. So it's a pretty smart way to go about it.
It is soul-saving, not soul-destroying, I think is the way to put it. Gemma, let's bring you in.
Well
done. Businesses are being asked to pay the JobKeeper payment as soon as possible, but as I put to the Treasurer, they won't see the government money until May. How is that going to work?
Well, Michael, that's a very pertinent question. Many businesses are facing a cash crunch. They've seen their income, or the majority of their income, dry up overnight, but they're still stuck with a lot of costs that they can't get rid of so easily. Two things that will help is, firstly, the ban on evictions that was talked about last night. That might help some businesses over the next 6 weeks get some immediate or near-term, at least, rent relief, and then every bit of cash flow helps at the moment. And secondly, as the Treasurer did point out, banks have been asked in very, very clear terms to play ball and to cooperate and to help businesses, so businesses can take on loans with no interest or payments due at this point. Now, I can understand with such an uncertain future ahead, many businesses might be reluctant to load up on debt in the near term, but they will need some sort of bridge to make their way through the next 6 weeks.
Mark, we're looking at a total of $320 billion in pandemic packages so far. Our surplus has been well and truly wiped, but is that why we've got it?
Yes, I think the surplus, we'll be lucky to see one this decade, won't we? I mean, that's a monumental amount of debt that we're going into, but for the right reasons. And every country, let's face it, around the world is doing the same thing because they have to. So, you know, the notion of the surplus up until just a few weeks ago was the holy grail of economic management for governments. It was the great endorsement of good economic policy, and now it's gone back to, you know, this sort of dusty, ethereal thing that will probably never occur in the next decade. But it's secondary to really ensuring that people can maintain their jobs and their livelihoods and their spirits at this time. As Michael said, put it beautifully, it is about bolstering people's spirits through a tough time. So, you know, surplus was something we talked about in the political discussion a few weeks ago. Just doesn't seem important now.
Mark, very briefly, just one more point with you. We heard the Treasurer say an interesting point that 8,000 people had already signed on to this scheme, 8,000 businesses
8,000
already.
businesses, yeah.
Extraordinary. So they're getting the message that this is going to be 6 months of pain here. They need the help now.
Yes, that's right. And I think also to the point of what businesses do who are struggling with cash flow now, my understanding is that this can be backdated to the 1st of March. So if those businesses can pay in the short term between now and May 1, then they might be able to claim that money back from the ATO on May 1. So, but it's really getting across this period, and that's where the banks step in. You know, the banks are there as a backstop to help businesses with lines of credit and loans. But it's about getting over the next month to that hump, and then in the future, and really no one knows where the end line is on this. You know, where is the finishing line?
Good point.
Gemma, no superannuation will be taken from these payments. People have already been allowed to withdraw up to $20,000 worth of super. Is this going to set up younger people for a bit of financial strife later in life?
Well, Mel, with regards to the super payments in the JobKeeper system, it's up to the employers whether they want to pay that 9.5% or not, but I certainly imagine, given the climate and the circumstances, most won't be doing that. When the option was made to withdraw up to $20,000 of super a couple of weeks ago, the share market had just plunged by around a third, which is clearly an absolutely horrible time to take your money out of super if you don't absolutely have to. So hopefully this was seen by people only as an absolute last resort. If you're a young person and you have your career and your future ahead of you, you certainly should have enough time to ride out the share market bumps. of which there will be many. It's a volatile investment at the best of times, particularly at the moment. And if you're older, you should have a more conservative portfolio where there is less risk overall. So certainly not encouraged to dip into your super if you don't need to.
All right, Gemma, Mark, thanks so much for your time.
Thanks.
More than 120 Australian passengers stranded on an Antarctic expedition ship in Uruguay today sent a video plea to Scott Morrison begging to be rescued. Have a look.
Prime Minister, we need you to act quickly, as we do not know how long we will be allowed to be moored at Montevideo, and we don't know what will happen to us after that. Our future is very uncertain.
Please, Scott Morrison, bring us home!
And the holidaymakers, mostly retirees, are on board the MV Ocean Atlantic, which was returning from a once-in-a-lifetime adventure to the Antarctic. There are no signs of coronavirus on board, and while other nationalities have been flown home, the Australians remain on board for now.
Now, there's been a positive development for those passengers, which we're going to get to very shortly. But first, let's hear from Kim de Govrik, a recently retired ranger and a volunteer firefighter who had a very busy summer. He lives in the Blue Mountains. I spoke to him earlier. Well, Kim, thanks for joining us firstly. Can you tell us what happened on your way back from Antarctica?
Yes, well, we were heading to South Georgia and we were denied access at the port there. So we ended up anchored off Montevideo in Uruguay, and finally, eventually, they let us dock at Montevideo port.
So passengers, I understand, Kim, of other nationalities have been rescued. Who's still left on that ship with you?
The only people left now, Michael, are the Australians and New Zealanders, 140 of us.
So what do you do?
Well, not a lot. I mean, they've tried to organise some activities for us, but sometimes we've been asked to stay in our cabins just to maintain better isolation, but they finally let us out, and the doctor's been doing his rounds, and there's absolutely no problems with our health. We're very well and ready to hop on a charter flight and come home.
Well, there's been talk of a chartered flight for you, but what is the latest on that situation?
Well, the latest is that they've asked us for another 4,000 Australian dollars. So we've already paid, that's already been paid 5,000 Australian dollars.
Well, the Foreign Minister told me the other day that she wouldn't be leaving any Australians behind or stranded overseas, but how do you feel about that right now?
Well, we feel forgotten and left behind because nothing's happening. We've been here for 10 days now, and we just believe we've been hung out to dry and we've been forgotten.
Gee, I can't imagine the level of frustration. How would you describe it right now?
Well, people are obviously very anxious, very depressed, and we're really concerned that sooner or later the government will say, we've had enough, you leave the port, or they'll put us in a detention centre.
What's your direct message to the Australian government, Kim?
What we're asking is that they get on with it, get the charter flight organised, and please, Scott Morrison, get us home.
Gee, Kim, you've been through a lot over the summer. I know you're involved in the fires and now this. How are you feeling about it all?
Well, that's correct. I've been away from home for a lot of time over the summer dealing with fires, and now an extended holiday. I just feel a little bit let down by the Australian government after putting in such a huge effort over the fire season with many other volunteers and paid firefighters.
That is completely understandable. Look, Kim, we'll try and get that message through to the government for you, and we'd like to stay in contact too to make sure that you all get home as well.
Okay, well, look, thanks very much for your efforts, Michael. I really appreciate that, and I hope they can all organise a charter flight and get us home before all the airports and airlines completely shut down.
Will do. Thank you, Kim.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Now, look, as promised, we worked on that all after we just spoke to Kim. We've been on the phone and in email contact with the Foreign Minister, Marise Payne, to ask for help on behalf of all those stranded passengers. The good news is this, just only recently released a statement to us, Marise Payne, the Foreign Minister, confirming that a charter flight is now scheduled for departure this Wednesday, and that the government will ensure passengers like Kim are reimbursed for the big price rise. You heard him explain that. So some good news tonight for Kim and all those other Australians on board the Atlantic Ocean ship. He's still asleep at the moment, though, so we can't actually tell him. We're trying to get through to him. Yeah. So a good result.
Wait till you do. Now, tough new rules introduced over the weekend now require all international travellers returning to Australia to spend 14 days in hotel quarantine before they're allowed to go home. 26-year-old Katie Hardy from Townsville is one of those Australians. After flying in from Canada, she is currently spending her isolation period away from her family and friends and her fiancé, who she was forced to leave behind. I caught up with Katie a little earlier. Katie, welcome home. First up, well, almost, because you're still not quite home, are you? Townsville is where the family is. You must be feeling pretty disconnected right now.
Yes, it's been a pretty overwhelming experience. Was able to FaceTime them today, which was awesome. But yeah, it's just pretty excited to get home.
Yeah, I bet. How are they managing then, mum and dad at the other end?
Well, my brother just came back from Canada as well. He is in quarantine with my dad. He was able to get here before they changed the law. So all of our family is kind of split up at the moment, which is a bit upsetting.
Yeah. And am I right, you just got engaged and you had to leave your fiancé Sam back in Canada. When will you see him next?
We actually have no idea. Basically, it's until they open the borders again. We were told an hour after we rescheduled our flights that he wasn't able to come with us.
Wow. What happens now? Because you've got 2 weeks here at this hotel in Sydney that you're at, and then you go back home to Townsville. Am I right that you may have to do quarantine again?
We will have to quarantine again for 2 weeks.
Wow. At home?
I haven't been told. But yeah, basically because we're crossing state borders, it means that we will have to quarantine for another 2 weeks.
Have you felt the process has run, I guess, as smoothly as it could? Are there any suggestions that you could make on how it could be improved?
I feel like we're a bit of a trial at the moment because of the new laws. Basically, how we got here and the process of that, they did a great job. It's just the information that I'd kind of rather know more about, just because basically we're just kind of learning day by day what's going to go on.
Everything considered, you're fairly comfortable, you're being looked after, it's just going to be a few long, boring days.
Yes, yep, definitely.
Yeah. Glad you're safe and sound. All the best for the next trip home when you do get there, Katie, and thanks for talking to us.
Thank you so much.
She's disconnected from anyone, isn't she? This is just showing what people are going through. They are everywhere, scattered everywhere, but it's what we have to do at the moment. Here we go. All right, still to come. More hope today as infection rates drop for the second day in a row. We'll take a look at the COVID curve.
How our testing rates stack up against the rest of the world.
We talked to the boss of Woolworths to find out if supply is meeting demand and their new plans to help those who are struggling.
And the Australian researchers working with scientists around the world to fast-track a vaccine. That's next on the latest from 7 News. For the second day in a row, Australia has had a drop in its infection rate. And senior reporter Denham Hitchcock is here to show us how that looks on the COVID curve.
Thanks, Mel. Make no mistake, our lives right now, these restrictions are controlled by this data and how it's interpreted. So let's take a closer look. First, let's begin down south in Tassie. They remain in the low single digits. South Australia, cases were already low. Now they've been halved to just 6. Western Australia, no data yet for today. Interesting to see if yesterday's small increase was a one-off or a trend. Now, Queensland, they had a big drop in cases yesterday. Today, they're holding steady. Now, take a closer look at Victoria. Their downward slide continues, only 56 cases today. And New South Wales, it certainly looks like a trend, doesn't it? Down they go. All right, next graphic. Now, this is what our daily infection rate looks like when all the states are combined, which is where you see just how dramatic this drop has been. But let's add something else. When our restrictions came in. Borders closed, March 20th. Stage 1 restrictions here and then Stage 2. Now, we know there's a lag in the data, which means right now we're seeing the results of Stage 1 restrictions. That's 7 days ago, which is why this downward trend may actually continue.
It's fascinating to watch that curve. I love it every night. It tells us a lot, doesn't it?
It goes that way.
It does. Yeah, it's good. Keep it going.
Thanks, Denham.
Well, Australia's COVID-19 testing regime is among the world's best, according to the experts, with one of the highest levels of testing and lowest positive test rates, as Denham's been explaining. So how do we compare to the rest of the world? Let's bring in our panel of experts, infectious disease physician Sanjaya Senanayake and Professor Mary Louise McLaws, an advisor to the World Health Organisation on COVID-19. We love having you both here. Thank you again. Sanjaya, let me start with you. Which countries have the best testing systems? Which have the worst?
Hi, Michael. Well, if we start with the worst, the US has about 313 tests per million people, and Japan about 118 tests per million people. Now that is quite low, in fact very low, and you can see that in the United States it's leading the way in terms of confirmed cases, with probably many cases undiagnosed, and Japan also has been seeing a recent surge in cases. And you compare the 118 and 313 cases, tests per million people, to South Korea, which is doing 6,000 tests per million people. And talking about South Korea, they're doing really well. They've almost tested 400,000 people. They had a massive surge with their outbreak, but they have largely controlled it thanks to their testing and other measures. Germany is another country which is doing a lot of testing, about 120,000 tests per week. Now they've got 62,000 cases, but they have a very low case fatality rate, under 1%, and their hospital system is coping. And Australia, I've calculated, would have done over 200,000 tests, and as you can see, our curve is coming down. So test, find the people who've got the COVID-19, even the mild cases, and isolate them so they don't infect anyone else.
Now, Mary Louise, that is good news as far as what Australia is doing, but can we improve testing methods, do you think?
Absolutely. I know that Australia has received a rapid point-of-care kit that requires a finger prick. Now, it's not considered to be a brilliant test for diagnosis, but from an epidemiological perspective, it can be very good for screening people, particularly those patients that go to the GP that have had symptoms for at least 7 days and they're not getting any better, because it does pick up an early marker. So it could be a real game changer for us to be able to identify some mild cases as well, even to go back and test those that tested negative, to ensure that we know exactly how many cases that we've had.
Sanjaya, can I ask about the flu? Because we're all being encouraged to book in and get our annual flu vaccine. Will the coronavirus have a knock-on effect for this year's flu and even next year's?
Mel, I think it is quite possible. These could well be partners in crime, flu and COVID-19. We know that COVID-19 likes winter, just like flu, and we also know that you can get co-infection, so more than one virus infecting one person. And there's also a theory that if someone gets COVID-19 and another virus, such as flu, they might even become a super spreader, which is what we saw with SARS. So in order not to become a super spreader, in order to not become sick by having two viruses at the same time, get your flu vaccine.
Because we're wondering if it'd be affected because we're all staying away from one another, we're all cleaning a lot more, we're all sanitised. We're talking today in the office about the impact that that might have on the forthcoming flu season.
Oh, look, absolutely. One reason we think we see so many respiratory viruses in winter, flu and a whole host of others, is because it's cold and because we're all closer together. So if we are social distancing, I suspect we are going to see a positive impact on the incidence of flu and other respiratory viruses, but that still doesn't mean you shouldn't get your flu shot.
Well, Mary Louise, we're doing pretty okay at this stage with the social, the social distancing measures, but I'm keen to hear about our health workers at the moment. How have health workers had to alter what they do and how they behave during this pandemic?
Yes, look, mostly healthcare workers, hand hygiene at around 80%. But if you actually watch them for a bit longer, when they don't think they're being watched, their hand hygiene rates are often nowhere near that. But this will actually help them to adopt an incredibly important and very basic infection control practice of hand hygiene that will not only help them, but will also help to keep the environment from being contaminated with contaminated hands and also passing on other infections to other patients and other healthcare workers. So I think that their hand hygiene rates will go up. Their ability to put their masks on and off and their gown and their gloves properly will certainly improve, because it's something that healthcare workers don't always do as a routine care preparation. So I think that they really will enhance their basic infection control procedures.
Changing so many of us in so many ways, isn't it, Mary Louise? Thank you, and Sanjay, thank you very much tonight.
Pleasure.
I want to show you some emotional and some amazing pictures now. Dedicated ground staff waving off the final Virgin Australia flight as it departs Sydney for Los Angeles. This is the international flights, that is. When it lands, where will the plane be stored? It's a nice wave off by the ground crew there. Good job. Now, airline bosses, have a look at these amazing pictures, have had to find urgent storage for thousands of grounded planes. This is American Airlines, there's British Airways there. Many have been left lined up bumper to bumper on closed runways right around the world. Some 6,000 jets have been parked, which amounts to around 28% of the entire global fleet.
Wow, and from one parking dilemma to another, a Sydney startup business has put out a call for anyone living near a hospital to offer their vacant car spots to healthcare workers for free. The company, called Share with Oscar, is hoping to help nurses and doctors get to work more easily during these challenging times.
Well, still to come, some practical advice for those out of work. A business expert joins us live. And we talk to the boss of one of Australia's biggest retailers to find out how and who they're hiring.
Also, the Australian scientists leading the charge to fast-track the vaccine, and how to cope with isolation from a man with one of the loneliest offices above Earth. It's next on the latest from 7 News.
The pandemic may be putting thousands out of work, but some industries are still looking to hire, including one of Australia's largest retailers, Woolworths, and their CEO, Brad Banducci, joins me now. Brad, good evening to you. Thanks for joining the latest. Now, you recently announced you were recruiting 20,000 staff. Tell me about the roles and what these people are recruited for.
Thank you. Yeah, so we're looking at hiring 20,000 people to join us in our stores, in our call centres, in our home delivery business in particular, and to the extent people are qualified, into our supply chain as well.
Now, the shelves are looking a bit more stocked this week in some places. You're in one of your stores right now. Two questions. Has the panic buying slowed, and do you have toilet paper on the shelves where you are right now?
Well, I've got a yes and no there. Yes, the panic buying has slowed, and I'd like to thank all of our customers for modulating their demand, making sure we've got enough to go around for everyone. But unfortunately, when I walked in tonight, we were out of stock in toilet paper in Double Bay. It'll be back in stock in the morning, so still a bit of work to be done there. But we are getting better every day, and that's really thanks to our customers and our team for the hard work that they're putting in.
Still hit and miss, though, isn't it, Brad? I mean, I found some yesterday, but that took a good couple of days of searching. So some of those supplies still not quite there.
Look, it's still this whole issue of surge demand, but it is getting better day on day, and that's the only thing I can ask you to judge us on. And that's really what we focused on as a team, just lifting our performance every day. And thanks to the modulation in demand, it is getting better every day. So I'd ask our customers to continue to be patient with us, and hopefully you can also see the differences.
You're hiring, but you're also trying to deploy as many of the leisure and hospitality workers from that division in that group team affected by the mandatory hotel closures. How's that going?
It's going well. There were 8,000 people that were stood down from ALH, and we've engaged with all of them to provide them opportunities inside the rest of Woolworths. As of yesterday, I think 3,700 have already been placed inside Woolworths. So that was our first priority, but then we've also reached out to like-minded businesses with teams that have very similar skills to us. It started with Qantas. I did actually, though, very specifically reach out to Paul Scurry at Virgin on the weekend. We're very interested in both organisations. They bring a lot of skills and talent that we'd love to be able to access, at least in the short term. Crown, we are engaged with Ken Barton on Sunday, a Village Roadshow Entertainment Group, Cotton On, just a lot of organisations actually with a lot of talent that would be great to access in the short term, and that's certainly what's happened. We've got over 10,000 people we've now placed inside the group.
Brad, whilst I have you, I must ask you about this huge package announced today by the federal government, the Job Keeper program for Woolworths. What would that mean?
Oh, look, for us, it doesn't mean anything for us in the sense we're committed to still hiring people, giving them jobs, giving them opportunities. I think it's terrific for the broader economy that, of course, has come out. But for us, it's just about us focusing on jobs, safety, and, of course, being in stock, in particular for our vulnerable customers.
Right, Woolworths CEO Brad Banducci, thanks for joining the latest.
My pleasure.
And for advice for Australians who have suddenly found themselves out of a job, let's bring in Dr. Troy Serena, a senior lecturer from the Macquarie Business School. Dr. Serena, what is your advice for people currently trying to get back into the workforce?
Well, look, good evening, Mel. I guess I just want to start by saying don't do this alone. At the moment, it's been such a traumatic event that a lot of people are experiencing with losing their jobs. We've got to take advantage of the people and the services that are now made available. Now, the first thing I'd be saying is look at that Job Keeper system that the federal government has just announced this evening, and to look at contacting your employers to see if, in fact, you can be re-engaged. That would be the first thing I would be telling people who have lost their jobs, because we have an incredibly resilient workforce out there, and I think there'll be a lot of employers who'll probably be keen to take advantage and at least look at these types of payments that are on offer. But there's other short-term things that we can do, and I think some of the things that we've got to look at is chase those opportunities in the labour market that have just been appearing. You've just heard from Woolworths that there's been wonderful 20,000 job opportunities at Woolworths. We've seen Coles hiring, and we've even seen the New South Wales government hiring at the moment. So chase those opportunities. And I guess the third thing I would say in terms of advice for right now is to look at, is there an opportunity to re-skill? Are there gaps in your skill set, and can you use this time to take some safe harbour in the university sector or doing TAFE study to get some micro-credentials so you can be prepared for when the economy rebounds?
Yeah, really good advice, and also something to focus on. It's fabulous, and it's good to see so many people are adapting, which has been wonderful. So, Dr. Troy Serena, thank you. Thanks for those tips.
No problem.
Still to come, fast-tracking the vaccine. The scientist who says he has the key to speeding up a COVID-19 breakthrough.
Dressed for Success, the high-end fashion house that switched to making much-needed scrubs for our health workers.
And some tips on dealing with isolation from the man with the loneliest office in the world. He's a terrific fella. He's next on the latest from 7 News. An Australian research facility is leading the charge when it comes to breaking down the molecular structure of the COVID-19 virus, something which will really help create the vaccine. I'm joined by Dr. Andrew Peel, the director of the ANSTO's Australian Synchrotron in Melbourne. It's the part of the Nuclear Science and Technology division here. Andrew, thank you so much for joining us. What are you trying to understand about the coronavirus structure and why?
Thanks, Michael. What we're looking at is trying to understand the parts that make up the coronavirus. If you think of it as being like a jigsaw, and I think there's a lot of people around the country doing jigsaw puzzles at the moment, then you can think of it as a partly completed jigsaw puzzle. And what we're trying to do is help people get a good enough view of that jigsaw puzzle to see how to lock in the other parts of the jigsaw. And we're doing that in a very large facility. If you can see over my shoulder, we're in Australia's biggest particle accelerator. It's about the size of the MCG. But you need something that big to see something as small as the coronavirus. And what we can uniquely do is provide images that show the breakdown of individual proteins in the coronavirus. And with that three-dimensional information, you can then design or understand the things that lock into it and put you on a road to a vaccine.
So if you understand that part of it, that helps you with the vaccine. How does the vaccine, if you understand how it all locks together, is that help a vaccine attack it as such?
Absolutely. So a vaccine, of course, is helping the body's immune system understand what's going to attack it and priming it. So what we're in the business of doing is understanding the pieces of coronavirus that we can then use to help the body train itself to have a better immune response. And the beauty of a facility like ANSTO's Australian synchrotron is that you can do that very, very quickly. So researchers can understand in as little as 5 or 10 minutes whether they've got the right pieces of the puzzle to help them design those vaccines.
I think one of the fascinating things about this outbreak, Doctor, is that we're learning so much about what our scientists in Australia are doing. I'd never heard that we had a synchrotron before. You're standing in front of it showing us all about it. But you're also getting help from other researchers around the world too. There's some great cooperation going with sending in protein samples. And how's that helping out?
It is truly it's an international effort. You know, there are researchers all around the world working around the clock to try and combat this disease. One of the great things is that those international researchers are coming to our facility because it is one of the best in the business at helping them solve these problems. Couple that with the fact that the researchers in the Australian community, particularly in relation to immunotherapy, are some of the best in the world, if not the best in the world. So you've got a really potent package there to try and solve and try and accelerate a cure for coronavirus. And I, for one, I'm really proud to be part of an Australian institution that's really making steps in this race.
We're proud that you're doing it too. I think it's, as I said, it's a fascinating thing to see how many clever people we have in this country helping out in this race for a vaccine. So, Dr. Andrew Peel, thank you for your work and thanks for your time tonight.
Well, you either love it or hate it. Self-isolation can be a dream or a nightmare, depending on who you ask. So how do we handle it? Well, here are some tips from a man who experienced one of the loneliest offices in the world, Canadian astronaut Chris Hadfield.
You know, it's an extremely dangerous environment up on board the space station, and yet we find a way to thrive and be productive that far away from our normal lives. We do it through 4 different things. Number 1, understand the actual risk. Don't just be afraid of things. Then, what are you trying to accomplish? What are your objectives? You know, what's your mission for right now? Make that clear for this afternoon, for this week. Then look at your constraints. Who's telling you what you need to do? What financial resources do you have? What are your obligations? Take action. Start doing things. They don't have to be the things that you always did before. Take care of family, start a new project, learn to play guitar, study another language, read a book, write, create. It's a chance to do something different that you've maybe not done before. And then, friends, take care of your spaceship. And I wish everybody happy landings.
He's a good man, Chris Hadfield. Good advice too. Still to come, as everyone pitches in to help, we meet the high-end fashion retailer, stepping up to ensure our health workers have enough uniforms. That's all here. Next on the latest from 7 News. We're back in a minute.
Our healthcare workers are worried about many things at the moment, but there is one you would not expect, and that is running out of their uniforms, known as scrubs. So a very different COVID diaries tonight, and Denham is here to explain who is here to help.
That's right, Mel. Extra shifts at the hospital and a need to change their scrubs more often has led to an unusual shortage. So one tiny fashion house in Melbourne has ditched their latest catwalk collection and is madly cutting and sewing for the COVID crisis.
Hi, my name's Luca Ray. I'm the production manager at the Social Studio. We heard there was a desperate need from doctors and nurses out there for some more scrubs. So we've redirected our team, our workload towards manufacturing as many scrubs as we can. We have plenty of experience making dresses, pants. We've never made scrubs before. We don't have a pattern for scrubs. So we had a doctor Uber us a pair of scrubs yesterday morning, and we've gone from there. Myself and my team are getting up in the morning feeling an extreme sense of purpose to be able to contribute toward helping people out, the staff on the front line. It's no longer about companies and business. What we're doing is to help our healthcare workers help us. In the last 36 hours, we've received so many individual orders from doctors and nurses. We're at capacity for the next few days. We don't know how long we can keep this up, but we're going to give it everything we've got.
Of the studio knew about the scrub shortage as her brother is a doctor, and not only is it providing for our healthcare workers, Mel, it's also keeping the staff there employed.
It is a fantastic example, isn't it, of adapting and staying on the theme of scrubs. We found a video of a doctor preparing for a day in the COVID-19 ward. 11 separate layers of clothing goes on to protect this doctor. Incredible precautions to make sure that he doesn't get the disease. It would take a long time.
Long time, necessary, and what a lot of our nurses and medics are now preparing to go through as well.
Yeah.
OK, we're going to be right back with your Tuesday weather forecast here on the latest from 7 News. Welcome back. We're going to take a live shot now over Rome's Colosseum, where it's very empty. No tourists anywhere. That country in complete lockdown. Currently 9 degrees there. Let's have a look at the temperatures around our country. Canberra 25 and cloudy. Hobart also cloudy and 20. Perth mostly sunny and 27.
And in the other regions, Gympie partly cloudy and 30. Forbes 28 with a few showers around. Partly cloudy and 22 degrees in Victor Harbour.
Before we go, this caught our eye today. We'll bring it up full screen and show it to you now. A very simple message, which really resonated. It's been going viral. You're not stuck at home, Mel. You're safe at home.
I love it. It's perspective, isn't it? How you look at it.
Good way of putting it. So there's that message. Well, from Mel and I, thank you for your company this evening. From the team here at 7 News, that's the latest. I'm Michael Usher.
And I'm Melissa Doyle. Good night.